Ed Martin, it's such a pleasure being here, and especially because you're our first ever guest here at the Counterlawfare Institute. So thank you very much for, I'm in your office here, we're in your office, but thanks very much for doing this.
I'm glad to do it because I encourage you in what you're doing. I loved your book. I read your book. I love what you do, but also this is very important to put a focus on not just lawfare, but how do you counter lawfare? How do you, I got a lot of attention when I said name and shame. We should name these people that did this. We should shame them. But part of that is this understanding that you have to fight back. And a lot of times it's prosecution. I hope it will be. But a lot of times it's a pardon for people that were persecuted and prosecuted, or other relief. I know you have been a great help, and I've worked too to help people. Sometimes they're a victim of lawfare and they don't have anybody to turn to. And sometimes they don't need a dramatic relief. They need a helping hand, like they need something for them. And so I appreciate that you're doing this, and I encourage you, and I encourage people that are watching this to get involved.
The sad irony in a way is that you both are known as a person who fought and is fighting lawfare in various roles, but including as U.S. Attorney for DC, including as head of the anti-weaponization group at DOJ, and of course now as pardon attorney. But at the same time, you're also a victim of lawfare. What's the status of that?
Well, I think there's two bar complaints going right now. I'm sure there'll be more. It's what's funny about that is when I became U.S. Attorney, I actually wrote to the bar, the D.C. bar, and I said, I noticed over the years you've been inconsistent in how you applied the rules, the law of the D.C. bar. You sent a letter to someone who said, we'll never open a bar complaint when there is not personal knowledge of the action. And then Jeff Clark got a case opened because Senator Dodd sent a letter to you and he had no personal knowledge, and they didn't answer. And a few weeks later, I got a bar complaint against me by someone I never met or heard from and had no knowledge. These incidents, they're meant to cause, as you know, layers of problems, right? Number one, you don't feel good about yourself to have a bar complaint because I'm a lawyer, I worked hard at it. Your family, my wife, is like, what's happening, right? And then you got to spend money to fight it off. Now, in this case, Department of Justice defends me because I was in my official duties, but most people don't have that benefit. And then there's the community of people that say they care about these ethics and morals, and they say, oh, well, what did you do and all. It's a real challenge. And so mine's very small. Happily, the Department of Justice defends me. I don't really care. I mean, in the sense that I have my DC bar, which I value, but I'm from Missouri, as you know, and my Missouri bar license is there. And look, these are the kinds of threats they do to a guy like me. I'm not in jail yet, and I wouldn't be for that, but this is what they do.
Investigations and targeting people and so on. And it is that,
Yeah.
But isn't it often driven by activists?
Of course, we were talking offline about this, that, there's these nonprofits that start up. I remember I ran for Congress in 2010 in Missouri, and at the time I was put on a list by CREW, Citizens for Renewing Ethics in Washington. It's a front group, one of the ones set up by, I think, Norm Eisen and others to just harass people. I was put on the top 11, I was number 11, most corrupt politicians in America. I'd never run for office and been in office. It was because I was taking on an incumbent Democrat, and this was a hit squad. And that's where I first learned. I thought, okay, what's happening here? And now all these years later, what you look at and you see, as you say, the working between when the government uses its prosecutorial power, and bar associations, by the way, are quasi-government agencies. They're run by the courts in every state. And so, but when they use their prosecutorial power at the direction of these outside groups that are obviously interested, there's two problems. One, you can't see who's really doing this at these outside groups. And two, they rely on them in a system to make it seem like it's factual. Remember, Nancy Pelosi said the wraparound smear? She said, you get someone to say it, then the media covers it, and then you get to talk again about how the media covered it. That wraparound smear is used to destroy people and put them in jail. That's the difference, by the way. Political hardboard politics, run for office, win or lose, that's bad enough. They're using this kind of conduct, these outside groups, to put people in jail, take away their lives, separate them from their family, their resources, everything else.
Right, how do we get here? So when I look back, the Bush presidencies, Clinton presidency, and so there was, as you say, it's hardball. People get accused of, traditionally, of affairs and that kind of stuff. But at some point, we had that, it morphed into something different, something more evil, something worse, lawfare. And it's easy to say 2016 when President Trump became president and so on, but it started during the Obama years I mean, some of these organizations we just mentioned, most of them, in fact, were founded during the Obama years.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of ways to go with that conversation, and when you want to counter lawfare like you're doing, you got to talk about the roots, like what happened in our culture. Do we have lawyers that believe in winning over doing honorable things? And I think we've had a shift, and that's a longer conversation. But I will say, in terms of federal use of lawfare, it lands at Obama and Eric Holder. These were really nasty people, and their system. If you look at the players in that time, you get Lisa Monaco at the center of it, and Susan Rice at the center of it, Eric Holder. They changed the system, and if the consensus in the halls of power in the deep state and the bureaucracy, the consensus is we're right and we're correct and we're liberal and everyone should have a worldview. What happened after Obama and Holder was the consensus became we have to destroy those other people. That we are sufficiently more important and honorable than they are, not even honorable, just more important and right, correct, that we got to destroy them. And Holder did that, and so when they say something like Merrick Garland was targeting school board parents, or Catholics, Merrick Garland was on the auto pen, just like Biden. It was Lisa Monaco who was running the Department of Justice, and she has been through all the years the person, and she's, by the way, at Microsoft now. She's at a high level, making tens of millions of dollars a year as one of the senior people at Microsoft. I tell people all the time, we need to name and shame these people. We should shame her. People should not want to be in a room with her for what she did. And yet she's at Microsoft making tens of millions of dollars, and that's a publicly traded company. People should know. So my point is that it started with Obama. Now, are there Republicans that are rotten and use lawfare? You're damn right, of course. I mean, sin and wrongdoing doesn't stop with party affiliation. In fact, it's generally who has power and incumbency in power that you'll find wielding this. But we've never seen anything like what Obama and Holder did, hand in glove, the whole time that they were in office.
Lisa Monaco, of course, was there at the origin of Russiagate. And Russiagate, in my view anyway, is sort of ground zero of lawfare.
It is. I agree.
It was something we've never seen before. It started off as a campaign smear. Okay, we just talked about that. Usually it's about affairs and things like that. This time it was about colluding with Russia. So that's already sort of an escalation over the usual campaign smear. But it was still a campaign smear until the government got involved. And the government co-opted the Clinton campaign smear and ran with it and weaponized it.
Right.
And Lisa Monaco, when she was still at the White House in 2016, was at the center of that.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing spiraled, I wouldn't say out of control, it was very controlled, but it still spiraled, it avalanched, it grew so huge, it brought in so many people. And one thing about that, just to say, and I want to come back to the origins, I agree with you, your assessment. I mean, we've talked too, but the Mueller investigation is an example of how the lawfare can be used even when you're in power. Even when the Republicans had power, they manipulated the system sufficient that you had this investigation, this rogue investigation by Mueller, who was also on the auto pen. By the way, I use the auto pen. If you're on the auto pen, it's like being on autopilot. Like you're just clueless. He was also, looks like, on the auto pen, and other people are driving it. But back to your point, I was on the group early on in the DNI with Tulsi Gabbard, looking at the classified documents that ultimately she declassified, a number of them. And there's one that I tell you is the birth certificate of the Russia hoax, and really the birth certificate of these repeated coups to try to overthrow Donald Trump and the government in general. And that is the agenda for the Friday, December, I might get it wrong, it's either December 9th or December 2016 meeting in the Situation Room and at 11 o'clock, and they're all there. Susan Rice, Lisa Monaco, Biden, name somebody. Brennan is there, Clapper's there, they're all there, and it's an all-hands-on-deck meeting. Why? Because on Thursday, the day before, and this is all in the documents that have been released, they were supposed to brief Obama, and they were supposed to say in the presidential daily brief, hey, the Russians weren't in this thing. I mean, they're inept, they're clowns, they're doing stupid meme things, that they weren't real. Because in August, the IC assessment had said, the Russians are not going to be a factor. They're clowns. They don't have enough horsepower. Don't worry about it. But Hillary was supposed to win. When Hillary lost, they were supposed to figure out something to do. Now they're flailing. They're flailing around. And they get to Wednesday night before the Thursday briefing over at where, either McLean or Langley, wherever it is that they pull out of the presidential briefing the thing that says, hey, it was the Russians didn't do it. It was, that wasn't sufficient. At the meeting on Friday, December 9th, I think I'm getting it right, 2016. You did, yeah.
They're all there. They meet for 3.5 hours. By 5 o'clock that night, it's either the Washington Post or the NBC has a story up saying that the intelligence community agrees Russia influenced the election to the detriment of America. And by Sunday, all the Sunday shows, Michael, the former Russian ambassador, McCall is on one of the Sunday shows. They're all in the Sunday shows. They're pushed out. The same people in the room. So in other words, the bat signal went out, and by Monday, the talking point is that the Russians interfered with our election and took it down. And now into the week, remember, Obama does an interview, and I think it was 60 Minutes or NPR, and he says, the Russians did all this, and then he left and came back, remember, and clarified, because he overspoke. He didn't know if he could get away with saying all that. The point is, that's it. And it's sloppy, if you look at it now, but it's because they were flailing. They had to stop this. And then they go get Flynn, same people, Susan Rice, the woman who ran the Attorney General for a minute, Yates is in the room, all these people are in the room, McCabe is in the room. It's incredible. And that's it. And they go forward and they engineer all these things. And my point in telling other people that is to understand this is not, first of all, it's not seamless. You can see it when you know where to look, and you have to look, but it's real. It's not, we're not making it up. You and I aren't just coming up with this like, oh, what did they do? It's now in black and white.
And it needs at least three elements. It needs the private activist, that side of things, to push it. So we talked about lawfare activists, lawfare groups that draft papers presenting the government with a plan. Like, if you want to impeach President Trump, here's a plan.
Yeah.
The evidence is copious. It's all
the tabletop exercises by the election integrity group at Georgetown trying to figure out how to run an election, and ultimately one of them was have a January 6th event. Okay, I mean, what's going on here? Yeah. Anyway,
that's right. No, and in the case of 2016 and Russiagate, it was an outside group, but it was the Clinton campaign that was the outside group in that context.
And the journalists, right? And Issakoff and others helping. Yeah, right.
So
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think we need at least three elements for all this to come together. We need someone pushing it, some activist, campaign, whatever it is. Then we need the government. And then we need the media. And coming back to December 9th here, 2016, I think this is so important in terms of understanding not just Russiagate specifically, but lawfare as a whole. The Washington Post had put out a story that morning that truthfully said that, we don't know what exactly happened in terms of Russia and interference.
Which morning? December 9th? Okay,
that very
morning.
day.
Okay.
And the day of when they pulled the briefing.
Uh-huh.
And someone must have then made a call to the Washington Post and said, no, this is the wrong headline.
Take it down?
They changed the headline to Russia did it. But if you go back nowadays, you can see it's still the same web address, it's still the same URL, it's the same story. If you go to archive, you can see what happened there. So the media just flipped the headline because they were told to. Right. So you need the media, you need the government, and you need these private activists, and it all needs to come together.
Yeah, the thing that's different, though, Hans, for my perspective, is the wielding of power by the government to punish. It's one thing, you can say to yourself, wow, John Podesta in the last year of the Biden White House shoveled billions of dollars out the door to green affiliated nonprofits under the whatever that IRA bill that they had, the boondoggle. Billions. Not thousands, not billions of dollars, I think close to $100 billion. And that's paying off their side, the people, the soldiers in their side, to have jobs and have support for those entities. That's corrupt enough. But what's different here is the lawfare is the using of the power, the government. Look, we celebrate America's 250th. Part of the thing we're rebelling against is that the British government was using the law. The judges were corrupt and they were targeting people living in America and the American colony. The juries were not giving fair trials. They were passing laws targeting certain citizens and protecting the government workers. That was what we were rebelling against. It was actually lawfare and weaponized government that was at the heart of wait, we're never going to get a fair deal here. We might as well try to get our own. So the difference maker here is the brazenness of using the government. Look, if you burned a car on the inauguration day in Donald Trump's first term, those people were arrested. Remember, there was a bunch arrested. And then quietly they were let go. Nobody was charged. Nobody got, because probably couldn't have got a jury to convict them anyway. Later, under Biden, they were given payments. They claimed against the government saying we were mistreated. And they got paid. for burning cars and rioting, because that's what the left does with the power when they have it, the Democrats. But in this case, the problem with lawfare is how brazenly we've accelerated past, and they're putting people in jail, they're silencing voices, they're destroying businesses. Again, we probably had this all through history, but we've never seen the rule of law break down like this.
One of the reasons we founded the Counterlawfare Institute is simply because we felt there's a sort of a vacuum in terms of the pushback. The lawfare activist groups are highly successful. They put out their papers, their blueprints for, it wasn't just Russiagate and Mueller. They put out a blueprint for the Georgia prosecutions of President Trump. Again, we can trace this. This is done in the open. You can go and there's a paper from one of these lawfare groups saying, this is how you prosecute President Trump and his allies in Georgia. Same in New York, and so on and so forth. So this is all done in the open. But there's never really any sort of pushback. And as you mentioned earlier, the victims like yourself, like Jeff Clark, like so many others, sort of mainly fighting on their own. And even if, as in your case, the DOJ is sort of manning the actual defense, you still have a big problem because there is no cohesive pushback, as in one group effort. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. And so we thought we need to bring this under one roof, at least intellectually, to have a framework for pushing back. Look at Russiagate. So many victims, so many people were prosecuted by this Mueller operation, but each and every one of them had to fight on their own. They had to get their own lawyers. Every lawyer had to reinvent the wheel on their own, and so on. So, for instance, when one of these lawfare groups pushed out this the Mueller report, again, this is not widely known. In 2017, the second part of the Mueller report was already out there because it had been put out by one of these lawfare groups. It would have been nice, I think, if there had been a group in existence back then that would have dismantled this and would have said, no, this is all wrong and this is false. It looks nice and it's got footnotes and it looks like a great, proper report. But no, this is why it's wrong, and, to at least create a bit of a counterweight.
Yeah, and when you and I talked a few months ago and you were telling me that this is where you were heading with this, and I encouraged you because I agree with you. I think if you see what's at stake in this country and you're worried about the direction, and sometimes that's elections, sometimes it's people who are in power, sometimes it's judges, sometimes it's culturally, whatever it is, you have to know that this effort is at the forefront. Like if there's a 5-alarm fire, it's this one. I mean, there's other ones you have to worry about in terms of, I know people are worried about AI and how it will impact the economy and how we adjust. We figure all that out, we always do, and I'm not minimizing that. I talk to young people and my children, there's uncertainty and all, but from the standpoint of America's exceptionalism, the crown jewels are the Constitution and the rule of law, and as we said earlier, a creed about who we are, what we believe in. There's a kind of honor to America. You're going to work hard. It's not always going to be fair. Fair is a term that's used by kids and morons to fight about life. It's not fair. I wanted to be 6'5" and play in the NBA. That's not fair. That's a stupid thing to worry about. But what the system was in America and founded for was a system that worked better than anywhere in the world. Still does work better than anywhere in the world. But that's what's at stake. They're stealing the crown jewels. I mean, if you want to go Minions or one of these shows, they're stealing the crown jewels, stealing the moon, and we're sitting around and sometimes debating the wrong things. And if you want to debate the right things, it's lawfare, it's how do you counter lawfare, how do you not only play defense, but play offense, and not lose your soul. Because I don't want to be Eric Holder. I think Eric Holder is a deeply, deeply troubled figure in American history for what he did. I don't want to be him. I don't want our Attorney General to be him. On the other hand, I want our side to know what's at stake, and you can't pretend it's a debate about whether we should have a marginal tax rate of 15% or 18.5%. It's at the heart of who we are.
Sometimes when I think back, sort of the past 10 years or so, it seems almost surreal, the things that were done to President Trump, the things that were done to people in his orbit, where you just think, wow, those things actually happened. But all of them are lawfare.
That's right. Well, yeah, that's right. I think so.
Every single one of them is lawfare. And again, in contrast to how things were fought out before, it's all made up. That's the other thing. I mean, in your case, you simply, as the U.S. Attorney for D.C., represented the Trump administration.
Right.
You were implementing an executive order, and for that, you're now being punished.
Well, they're trying to punish me.
Oh,
I think the process of the punishment, but I don't mind. But I mean, I agree with you. But remember, that's it's like a child. You have children. When you're trying to teach your children, you say, you go to your room because you talk back, and then people say, oh, I'm not going to talk back. We are, in some ways, we're animals too, as well as spiritual, and so what the culture starts teaching is, you can't. If you're going to be a lawyer and make a great living, you better not act like Ed Martin, because we're going to make your bar license more costly. And over time, that's what they're doing to us as a culture. We've talked about it before. So that's why it's such a threat. And but you talk about surreal. I agree with you. I think the last decade is almost like out of. You shake your head, you're like, this is a movie. But now I'll just challenge you to think like this: what must it have been like from 1770 to see the greatest world power ever? The British be beaten, and you must have been going around like, how could this happen? You lose. Washington lost almost every time for a long time, and then suddenly you win something small. I mean, you win a little battle, but it becomes a cry to go forward. Donald Trump should have never gotten back in office in 2024. Normal things happening. It's because he's extraordinary, and the moment was captured. And what you said earlier, that's why I think you're going to succeed so amazingly, is normal people know this is wrong. They feel it, and they see it, and they're waiting for people to say it so that they can come towards the banner. Fly your banner, hang your standard, as St. Ignatius used to say. Put your standard up so people can see it, and they'll come towards it. I think people in this country know. They don't want to talk about like this and that and the other thing. They know something's wrong, and it's off balance, and the government is the problem, and they want people that will fix it. But they don't want people to run it better. We don't need more running it better people. We need people that will challenge the system by eliminating and destroying and holding accountable and shaming and knowing it's going to be ugly, and they're going to make it dirty, and they're going to say things like, oh, Ed Martin is mean, Ed Martin's this and that. They call me all sorts of names. I'm like, I don't even know that guy. But that's what they're going to do. And so if you're afraid of that, you've lived it too, then go back to your room and pray hard. I'm for it, but the fight's going to be for the bold.
It is. We're not going to be able to right all wrongs. No one's been held accountable.
I plan on doing that, but okay, go ahead.
Okay. We're a 501c3, so our main mission is to shine a light on these things and to document them so that at least we have a record of what happened. Primary evidence, for instance, we have a big Russiagate archive. It's all laid out. Mm-hmm. And maybe nothing will happen, maybe something will happen in the next 5-10 years, who knows, but at least people will be able to go back, look at this period and say, well, look, this was all made up. This was lawfare. Now, of course, that it's not just educational. As you say, you need to fight back. Now, that needs to be scaled. I mean, you can't just be a small group and fight back on all scales, but what I think is really important, and I've mentioned this before, is to not just shine a light on the lawfare, but shine a light on the practitioners of lawfare.
Exactly.
I don't think most people appreciate that there's just a handful of people behind most of the lawfare.
Well, I'll get to that. Let me make one comment on what you said earlier. Your book, Swift Boating America, which was a great service to me, even though I'd been involved in all this maybe a year and a half ago when I finally read it, I think, you're right, because we have to write our own history. You start to say to yourself, wait a second, was all of history BS? Because it looks like the same fake news morons were doing that to us. And in some ways, you can't worry about that. You can worry about now. And you got to get, while we have this great president, we have to get out of this. People get frustrated, not more people aren't going to jail, that more people aren't going to jail. Me too. I want it faster. I don't really trust the Article 3 court system in the sense that it's too slow. One of the tactics that they use is slowing everything down and secrecy that hides stuff from us. So I wish it was faster. Having said that, we're living in a world. The world is not only about who goes to jail, it's about who's known to be a bad guy. If you're a pedophile, if one is a pedophile in a place, we ought to know that. And you'd say, hey, I'm not going to let my kids around that. If Lisa Monaco is the leader of this effort in so many ways in the last 4 years, especially 5 years, then we ought to. I don't want to be in a room with her. I don't want somebody to tell me someday we're having a bar association meeting. You and Lisa Monaco talking about Lawfare. I don't want to sit next to her because I don't want to sit next to people who I wouldn't want to sit next to a guy that was manning a death camp during World War II in Nazi Germany either. And that's how I feel. So we have to be willing, and we have to. One of the things that gets frustrated is when I was U.S. attorney, lots of these lawyers that worked on J6, and I said to somebody, I want the list. I want someone to go for a job in 20 years at the University of Arizona Law School and have to answer a question. Do you work on those cases? And some of them have an explanation. I was 27 years old. I was told that this is what I was supposed to do. I really wasn't sure. I'm not sure it's a good enough answer, but I recognize it. But most of them were participating, and they were participating with either a blind spot on the law or real malevolence. Those are the only two choices I see. And we ought to know who those people are. And so that's such an important part of writing your book, maintaining the history and getting it out. And for the next 50 years, we're going to be fighting to write that history. But in the interim, as you say, to know who's doing it and know what they did so that you can counter lawfare, stop it going forward, and be out there publicly and finding ways to stop it. That's the harder challenge, to be honest. The deep state wants to wait us out. They want to wait out the people in power, and they want to be able to get back to what they were doing. And that's what the threat. You hear them say it on the outside. They're going to get in power and they're going to come for people. But inside, that's the hard part of this massive bureaucracy.
Very much so. I mean, as you said, or as we said, it's a long-term effort.
Yep.
It's a tough road ahead, but you got the activists, you got the government, you got the media. So we'll have to kind of target all in terms of exposing, education, shining a light.
And one quick comment on the media, we have this opening because X is relatively free and other places are, and I think most people can see we can challenge when they try to constrain us as much as we can. We have to constantly fight that. But that's the great thing about that is you can find your band of brothers and sisters. You can find your group because you have access now to information. You have access through the technology. So you have to do that. It would be nice if there will eventually be, clubs in every town that are fighting this together and they can see each other. But for now, you can find it through the online resources and you're banded together. And you got to do that. You can't do it alone. You're not alone, is what you and I talked about. You may be sitting there saying, how can it be like this? I thought my country was different. And you're sitting there. Your neighbor thinks it too, and he needs you to say something, or you need to say something, or they need to both read Hans, and you start to get a sense of, hey, we're not alone, because this country, 75% of this country knows at the heart of what we're talking about, we're right. But 25% makes a lot of us scared, makes a lot of people feel uneasy to come forward, and they're worried about it. And I had a guy come in, and someone said that he wouldn't be allowed to coach his kids' basketball team because he's a big Trump supporter, and he was hurt. And he wasn't even convicted. He came in the pardon office. He wasn't convicted of anything, but he was telling a story. They do that. The emotional cost of that is real, and your neighbors and friends are feeling it too. And you have to be looking for that. We have to have solidarity.
Well, first among the direct victims.
That's right. It's another. Yeah, that's right.
And when I look back at all these lawfare operations of the past 10 years, the one pattern that comes up again and again is that all the victims were basically out on their own.
Yeah.
We don't have a big, budget. We don't have a big legal office. We don't have anything like that. So it's not like we can give them a huge umbrella to all come under. But at a minimum, at least give that support, the intellectual support that, no, your cases are actually all very similar, or they're actually all the same. You've just been divvied up into many, many different people, because it makes it easier for the lawfare activists to fight each one in a different court on their own. So I think that's if we're going to talk about steps you take, I think that's going to be one of the first big steps, to make that clear, to put that out, to educate people on that fact, as well as the fact that this has been pushed out, the lawfare has been pushed out by activists, and then the government has been co-opted. I think too often people think, oh, it's some bad apples in the government, even people who get it.
Yeah.
And I don't think I found a single instance where it was not initiated by some activist rather than by the government.
Yeah. I need to think about that one more, because I've seen inside. I think some of these government people do it without having to be prompted. But it's a symbiotic relationship for sure. You get to leave government and go to these nonprofits and make a great living, and then you're coming back and forth. But I want to comment on the victims. I prefer the term survivors. I say the survivors of weaponization. I, as a pardon attorney, I see people come in and they tell me these stories about their lives because they're seeking a pardon for themselves or their loved one and all. And there are so many examples, some stunning examples of the government, abusing the citizens in the process, failing to disclose exculpatory material in a way that's called Brady. It's called in a way that is not just abiding by the law, materiality in the case, but like the kind of sense, the spirit of the law, of the goodness of how you relate. Example after example of government being bullies. We know the examples. The survivors of weaponization. We have to tell those stories, to your point, because they deserve to be heard, and then you need to learn how to stop them. We also need to protect those people. I don't know why there's a great debate. The media tries to make it a debate about who hit a cop during J6 or who did that or whatever. We know that these people were targeted during the Russia hoax, during the Trump administration. We know this, and they should be. I'm not saying I'm a conservative. I'm not saying make everybody a billionaire, but I am saying if you spent, like many of these people did, your life savings on a lawyer, and you spent, you lost your job and you spent your savings because you had to pay for your kids' school. I saw this in the clients I dealt with for J6. We saw with mutual friends from Russia. The cost is immense, and the government has an obligation to reimburse these people for the kinds of costs that were incurred. Not Hans was going to be a ballerina and would have made $50 million a year. I'm not buying that. I don't want to be like a lottery ticket. But let's be real about it. And the other side, meaning the communists and the Democrats that try to run these things, they get that. They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna protect our side. I just think we have to reimburse these people, and we have to make them whole, and we have to reward them. I tell people all the time, I want it to be that someday when you go to an event, maybe we'll be old, and we'll say over there, they'll say, hey, that guy over there, he was a victim of the Russia hoax, and we'll say, holy cow, can I meet him? Like we say to guys that fought in World War II, like 100 years old, you were Iwo Jima, I want to meet that guy. That's how I want this to be, because in fact, these people had to take the beating so that we could see what these people wanted to do to America. So this is very devastating for that person, but it becomes a pivot for the rest of us to save the Republic.
They came very close to removing a president.
Based on... Well, I think they did in 2020 on that election, fake election. Go ahead.
No, you're right, but they brought in other hoaxes, other storylines, and so on. But in Russia, of course, being ground zero, but the original sin and so on, they came close.
Yeah.
And the point to note, again, I will say this forever, even to people who've already heard it 100 times, and many people have not. And if even when they hear it for the first time, they don't believe it. It was all made up.
Yeah.
Every single part of it was made up. Usually with these smears, there's something somewhere and then they blow it out of proportion, whatever. No, it was all made up. And all the victims and the whole country had to go through that.
Yeah.
For something that was entirely fabricated.
Well, and it's interesting then to talk about, because I want to insert this just because we've been talking and chuckling a little bit. It reminds me of Watergate, because there was actually a break-in, but it was not for what they thought it was, right? It was totally a different thing. But so in this case, but when you think about when it happened, the Russiagate, it really was, as you say, the Clinton campaign never thought they could lose. When you get out and see the conversations they were having, they didn't think they could lose. And therefore, when they lost, they were like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And in that sense, it was made up and hurried now that we can see it. But you're right, it just about worked.
Ed Barton, thank you so much.
No, Hans, thank you, and good luck with everything. I encourage the viewers and people that I've worked with to get involved with what you're doing and support it, and definitely support it. I know you're not coming at this with some gazillionaire like the left does. Soros didn't send you $1 billion to do this. You're doing this by individuals who are supporting it. So I encourage them, help in any way they can, and I certainly will be, and it's awesome. So thanks for your fight. Thanks for your book. I always say thank you. That was important to do. It takes a lot of work to write a book like that, and so I'm grateful. So best of luck.
Thank you.